Hello, I'm André Ramon-Rassoa, and I'm product marketing lead at OVHcloud. One of my missions is to help organizations adopt cloud-native technologies, and I'm very excited to have an expert of that topic today with us, Alexandre from Enix. Welcome, Alexandre.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be there to discuss with you today. As said, I work at Enix. We are quite experienced in Kubernetes, so let's share a bit our point of view here.
So, Alexandre, there is no secret for you that organizations are increasingly adopting cloud-native technologies such as Kubernetes. In fact, they are mainly attracted by the promises and the benefits. Basically, they expect velocity to develop and deploy application, more reliability for the infrastructure running that application, and better resource consumption. Can you explain in a few words who is Enix and how you can help customers in this adoption?
Sure. So Enix, we are a bunch of guys with minimal 10 years experience in production infrastructures and platforms. And we've been working a lot around Kubernetes these past 3 years. So we're here today to share a bit our experience in such matter and how to move to production to Kubernetes.
Okay, that's great. But there is some skill gap, and this is a major challenge for the organization if they want to adopt cloud-native approach, and in particular Kubernetes. I think it will be a bit short to explain this in 20 minutes. What do you think?
Obviously, Kubernetes is quite a complicated setup. We are here within this video to share a bit about the methodology you could use to go to production. And we will focus on a simple use case. It doesn't mean that it don't work with a complex scenario. We're going to discuss this at the end of this presentation. But we want to talk mainly about the methodology here and how to pave the way to production. So we're going to focus on a part of a workload. And for instance, we will avoid discussing, moving the complicated stuff like the database to production, for instance, within Kubernetes.
Okay, I understand that. So let's take an example. Now I'm a CEO of a small, medium business doing online business. And software is definitely our core business. And we have several applications that I believe can be modernized using Kubernetes. So we already have existing infrastructure in production. We have some sort of development technologies. And we have started software pipeline. So where do I start now?
So what we usually propose is to start with a simple audit, which could last 5 days. The idea is to review your existing production or infrastructure, your existing development teams, your methodologies, or any CI/CD in place. Observe this and select with you a subpart of this infrastructure and existing development setup. So we will take the most relevant workloads, the one that you are interested in, and then within this scope, we're going to plan together a bunch of stuff. The first one would be obviously the infrastructure topology. So will it be a cloud provider like OVHcloud? Would it be on-premises or would it be an hybrid cloud? The second aspect to review during this audit is the strategy in terms of Kubernetes distribution. For instance, it could be Kubernetes Vanilla, or it could be Rancher, it could be OpenShift, D2iQ. There are a bunch of them available on the market today. And the third aspect would be more related to human relationship and organization within the company. Sometimes, it's not always the case, but sometimes it's useful to adjust a bit the organization so that you are ready for a cloud-native application within Kubernetes.
Okay. What I get as an outcome from this audit is that we have defined the right application to start with. And this is the first important step. What is coming next then, Alex?
Andrew, so we start with this audit and a kind of clear objective, and then we're going to review within various different steps all of the different parts that should be, adapted and reviewed in order to go to production. So the first one would be to put your application within containers. It might be already the case in your company, but sometimes you want to go a bit further and have a more advanced approach in terms of putting your application within containers. Putting an application in a container also means reviewing the way that you configure it, ensuring that the secrets are managed correctly. And overall, the idea is to simplify the usage of the container so that it could be easily put in production. Then we move to the second step, which is continuous integration. Within continuous integration, the objective is, now that we know how to put the application within a container, is to automate this process, make sure that we can build up some containers automatically, publish them on a specific registry, so that it can be later used by the production platforms, and also obviously ensure that linting or testing is automated as well. So the third step would be the continuous delivery then. As soon as you've published your containers, you will be interested to deploy them in various kinds of environments. The main one would be production, of course, but you could have some staging environment before. And like, for instance, one environment per feature branch in your Git organization. So the way to deliver your whole application, meaning several containers in an environment, is this aspect of continuous delivery, and you want to automate that. Once you finish this CI and CD, that the lead names for this continuous integration and continuous delivery, then we move to effectively having your app in production with the following step, which basically means deploying your application within Kubernetes, but also organizing around it so that you're already in production. So the key stuff that you want to deal there is, first of all, the persistent data you want to have within your platform, how to store like the data that should be persisted even if you restart or schedule your application on different hardware. You want also to organize a centralized logging, meaning that you won't have to know where is the container on your platform. You just want to have logging somewhere centralized. You also want to ensure something that is not usual for legacy software, which is metrology. You want to have metrics, numbers, figures about how your application is performing. And finally, most important part, if you want to recover from a major outage, is to have a backup in place, making sure that you won't lose anything in case of a disaster. So once we reach all of these steps, then there's a last one, I would say, which would be reviewing all of these various steps and, adjusting a little bit from there to there. Because of course, it's pretty easy to put a software on a Kubernetes cluster in production, but then making sure that everything works smoothly can be a bit tricky. So you have to spend some time to review the whole process from zero to the production.
So Alex, I understood that. So it doesn't work at first try, from what you are saying.
There are a lot of challenges to anticipate within this process. Some of the most important ones are on this slide. Obviously, you will have, on one part, technical difficulties, but you will also face probably some organizational challenges. So on the technical side, what is pretty usual is to have difficulties to deal with the persistent volumes. It's a Kubernetes vocabulary, which basically means persisting data. The second point would be, and again, it's pretty usual, most of the applications lack observability. Observability is a way for the application to say, I'm healthy, I work at maximum performance, or I work at half the performance. This is something that needs to be developed within the application. I was talking about the metrics. We could talk about Prometheus or Grafana, but these tools are around, mastering the metrology around your application so that you know that it's running correctly or not, and then take action. On the organizational part of the challenge, I guess that, for this process to go within 30 days, you want to ensure that the development team is really there and able to, manipulate the application and do little changes so that we can move quickly to an application within a container, then automated and then in production. And also you will have to make sure that it's smooth between development, DevOps and Ops team. If you have the three of them, you want to make sure that there's no hole here in terms of organization. And of course, many more challenges within this process. But most of the time, or I would say every time, we reach production without any problem. And then the days after that, we face some difficulties.
So I get this. So now let's imagine that my team have deployed this application running with container and with Kubernetes in place. How should my team manage that in production? And if there are some aspects that we should need very cautious about, can you share good practice here?
In terms of day-to operations, so meaning once we are in production and it's running and we receive some connection from our customers, for instance, you have to make sure about a lot of stuff, but most importantly, I would say, is to review again this process that you have in place, which means production, centralized logging, methodology, backups, supervision, alerting. For instance, on alerts, you want to make sure that one alert equals one action. You want to, and if it's not, if you feel that an alert doesn't mean you need to do something, then you need to remove this alert. You want to make sure that you got an efficient organization to deal with all of the various problems you could face on a Kubernetes cluster. The second, another point, is the responsibilities between teams. It's pretty usual to have people from the development team that wants to operate on the operation side. Even better, you could have a DevOps team. Obviously, everyone will either want to participate or on the opposite side will not want to touch anything. So you have to make sure that the responsibilities are right with your new deployment. Dealing with containers and Kubernetes is different from dealing with historical infrastructure. All in all, you want efficiency in your company, of course. And on the long run, you will have to face maintenance of such Kubernetes clusters, as well as new capacity planning and etc. Okay, so we discussed about this simple use case. And just to conclude this short presentation, I wanted to state that, of course, it's possible to migrate complex scenarios to production. Maybe not within 30 days, it may be more complicated, and we can review a bunch of the areas where you could face more complex scenarios. The first one I'm going to discuss about is legacy software. You might face within your company legacy softwares, meaning old stuff that you cannot change easily or put them in containers and have something efficient. In that case, it might need some time to adjust, more time at least to adjust how to put the app within a container when it's feasible. Another one would be historical infrastructure, which means that even if you move to Kubernetes to a cloud provider, you move to your production to a cloud provider, you may want to stick with an on-premise database. And then you will want to interconnect your Kubernetes cluster and your historical platform. And this can be a bit tricky sometimes. Another example would be heavy workloads. And you know that on OVHcloud, you got a bunch of big machines that can handle such heavy workloads. It's pretty usual to face storage, massive IOPS, massive accesses and throughput. You could also face various GPU or CPU intensive tasks. In such case, you have to adapt a bit your Kubernetes cluster and the way you deploy softwares on all the Kubernetes nodes. And finally, the most usual one, I would say, is that rather than having a simple PHP frontal website, it's pretty usual to have a bunch of microservices with various databases. And when you face such a complicated application to migrate to Kubernetes, then you want to spend more time within the audit phase, within the put everything in container and automating everything then. So all in all, it's definitely feasible to migrate within 30 days to Kubernetes. And when you got complex scenarios, then I think it's better to talk to other people that already experience that. And by the way, we're here to answer to such questions within the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. I'm pretty sure that our audience now have some specifics because each application is different. And this is definitely the right moment to ask us questions about your own project, about your constraint, or whatever. If you have some comment, we'll be happy to answer them in this Q&A. Thank you.